everybody, I hope you guys are all doing super swell and having a fantastic week. First off, I want to start this video by doing something I wanted to do ever since I bought this building, which is remove the old crusty cement that was on this place probably since the 20s and expose that beautiful stonework that I can't wait to refinish. So let's get at that. That is much better. This cement has been on here probably since about the 20s. Again, for those of you who don't know, this used to be a window and it was added by the second owner, the veterinarian, to make an entrance into his vet clinic, which makes total sense. However, they did add cement covering all of these walls and then stopped at the corners here and right here by the side steps. So these areas were completely covered in stone. Still have a little bit of stubborn stuff down here that I'll have to get off, but no worries there. That'll come off fairly easily. The bigger issue though is a lot of the cement that has been left on these walls. So I need what's called a needle scaler, which I believe will be the best option to take all of this stuff off. Essentially the tools usually used for taking rust off of metal, but I've seen people use it on stones like this without too much of a problem. Hopefully I can be somewhat gentle about it. Otherwise, I'm not exactly sure how I can get all the cement off of this stone. As you can see, all these dark areas are little bits of residual cement, which have to come off because this doesn't look great. It certainly looks better than that, but it's still not perfect. And of course, as you guys can see, most of the joints here are quite deep, and this will definitely need a whole series of tuck pointing. No worries to anybody who saw me do the walls downstairs. We'll be using tools for this as opposed to my hands where I was just shoving stuff in the cracks. Again, these walls are exposed, they're the exterior of the building, and I want these looking quite nice. So we're gonna be using the correct pointing tools, and we're gonna do this up, make this perfect again. Also, when they built these walls, they did remove some stones from around here. You can actually see the wooden 4x4s, which I've never seen anybody use quite 4x4s for this. This is actually what's holding in the door frame itself. And there's one more right here. Also, this one I'll have to cut back a bit. You can see some of the residual cement that's in here. As long as it's on the edge, I don't really care that much. I just want the water, again, to be able to pass through the stone. So it's not really going to be trying to pass through the wood, which probably is better in the long run anyways. So this I am not so concerned about, but I have been collecting stones around the yard and obviously out of Mr. Hall's lot. which is the lot next door to me, which his foundation was identical to mine. So, and a lot of those stones are still in the dirt there. So I've been digging a few out, and then a neighbor hooked me up with a few extra stones too. So we'll be able to cut and patch a few stones in here, and we should be good to go. And then we got just this one here on this side, which I actually already found a stone that is perfect for this one and should be easily just slotted in there. Now on to this beautiful, beautiful frame. It is looking so much nicer. I mean, this thing was covered in so much spider webs. All the paint was flaking off. There were entire giant chunks of like the top up here and this whole side with this little groove pattern on the edges. It was completely missing and broken. So all of that again is filler. You guys have seen me use lots of filler in the past. Some of you guys might remember the big hole that used to be right here. That was for the light that was above out here. And that has been completely sealed up. And for those of you who are asking what am I gonna do about a light out here, this piece of conduit right here leads right inside, and that's a perfect place for a light because it doesn't affect my beautiful woodwork. It also doesn't have the power cords laying directly against wood, which is sketchy to me, but has it laying against stone. And as you guys know, stone isn't terribly flammable. And this goes all the way through a layer of brick to the inside, so it should be a fairly easy hookup. Great place for some kind of sconce. Still working that out. If anybody has any suggestions, let me know. Again, think historic. In other news this week, I took a little road trip to Chicago. Not for any kind of sightseeing, to go pick up some supplies for the mortar outside that needs to be done. Here it is, some of the Heritage Restoration Mortar. This is an NHL, standing for Naturally Hydrated Lime. 3.5 mortar, which is a very general purpose lime mortar. It is readily available in Europe and really difficult to find here in the US. Unless, of course, you are on the East Coast. Then it's not so bad. Luckily, Chicago isn't too far of a drive, about 5 hours each way. So it wasn't too big of a deal. But I do have a bit of a gripe concerning all of this. So here's my main point of contention with the entire thing. Buildings like mine have been built for probably roughly somewhere between 600 to 1,000 years, with limestone foundations, you know, wooden insides and brick walls. Sometimes fully stone, which of course happens as well. Sometimes half timbered, like you would see in Germany or something like that. But at least at a foundational level, these thick-walled stone structures have existed for a very long time. And in that really long time frame, people have developed materials and supplies that work very well with these buildings. One of those being lime mortar. Lime mortar has been around for a very long time. So we know how it reacts. We know how things work with it. We know how stone responds to it by generations and generations of people using it as a building supply. Us here in the US, though, for whatever reason, would prefer to shove inappropriate materials into our walls, try to waterproof them like crazy. For what reason, I'm not exactly sure. Because if we know how this stuff responds and we know how it works, because it's, again, about 1,000 years of testing in this, probably more, yet we prefer to use something like Portland cement, which has been around, well, since about the 30s, or at least in wide-scale adoption and use since the 30s. Why go for that? When there have been buildings, you know, in Europe, which are 800-900 years old, that use this same construction method and are still standing, and then are redone every so often with the same material, still standing. Now, the thing that annoys me the most is people in Europe can go pick this specific mortar up. Just drive to the local shop, and they have 3 different versions. They have a very soft, which is a NHL2. They have the mid, which is the 3.5, which is what I have here. And then they have the stronger, tougher stuff, which is the NHL5. But here in the US, you go in and ask for this stuff at any masonry store here in St. Louis, at least, and they kind of look at you funny. They've never heard of it. They've never used it. What we're sold instead is this stuff here, which is type O, which is a lime Portland mix, which is better than using just straight Portland, which a lot of people will use because it's softer than just regular mortar. And it does have some vapor permeability with, you know, a very large amount of lime in it. It only has a little bit of Portland compared to the lime. And this stuff is regularly sold as historic mortar mix. And why any of this is a problem and why use lime over anything with Portland is inherently stronger. It is very tough stuff. I mean, you've seen cement. Everybody knows what cement looks like. They know it can take an absolute beating. The problem is cement is harder than the limestone. And so what happens is when, you know, you have a freeze-thaw cycle like we do here in St. Louis, obviously it freezes in the winter, thaws in the summer, what happens is the limestone tries to move, because that's what these buildings are meant to do. They're meant to be slightly flexible. When the building goes to move, the cement doesn't give. And so what gives instead? My stone foundation gives. The bricks in your wall give, because they're softer than the material around them. Mortar is supposed to be a sacrificial part of a house. It's only supposed to last so long before it needs replacement. Now with this NHL 3.5 lime mortar, it's flexible, it's elastic. During your freeze and thaw cycles, the mortar is the part that takes the beating, not the stone. Now obviously we want the mortar to flex and move with the stones as they get span and contract throughout the seasons. And it's a really, really big reason why many buildings, again in Europe, end up standing for these really long times. And again, not a terribly different construction method here. And it just baffles me that somehow the West Coast or anything west of the Mississippi, we have just completely wrote off and forgotten about this. And I think it's maybe this mentality of, well, just use the tougher material. But that's not the point of a mortar. A point of a mortar is to be flexible and to move with things and to allow the house to expand and contract naturally throughout seasons. I mean, all of these products, from the stones to the brick, which is made of St. Louis clay, they're all naturally breathable. They're permeable. They're supposed to move and flex. The wood expands and contracts with the seasons. And if you try to put a very solid, rigid substance on it, it just doesn't work. But it really bugs me because if I had to drive to Chicago to get this appropriate mortar for the stone walls, what is everybody else here using? What are all the restoration experts here in St. Louis using? How many of these amazing homes here in the city are being damaged slowly by masons who don't know what they're doing? Now again, I'm kind of a newbie to this whole world, but everything I read about this and everything I've seen about this shows how absolutely devastating Portland cement can be for these historic structures. Why does Europe remember how to do all these things, but we have just completely forgotten? So what I'm saying, I guess, at the end of the day, if you're looking into masonry videos, it's a little hard to figure out exactly what they're talking about because things are called different things on this side of the Atlantic and that side of the Atlantic. But especially when it comes to stone and brick, I would definitely recommend listening to the Europeans on most of these things. Well, because they have the history of doing it. And it seems somewhere along the way, us Americans, except for maybe New England, have kind of forgotten what works.
Now on to my brand new job, which I'll share with you guys because it is historic and it is quite cool. Let's go over to Matt and Nikki's house and have a look at what I'm doing for them. Okay, so before we get into the windows themselves, I wanted to show you guys a few videos of just how amazing Matt and Nikki's house is. I do believe it is at least 10 years older than my house. So probably late 1870s, early 1880s, somewhere around there. The trim's a lot bigger, but man, it's a really beautiful, beautiful place. Huge plaster medallions, big arched and half round windows. It's just a really cool place and I'm really, really excited to be working on it. So these are the start of the windows I have here. In the video you could see the ones that I pulled out. This is the center window, which is the one I'm closest to being done with. Left-hand window and the right-hand window on that bay. These windows are all from their dining room and they're actually in pretty good shape, all things considered. They're definitely a lot better than the windows in my house when I first got here. They were rough. Most of the damage to these windows are fairly cosmetic. For instance, this is where an old sash lock sat. You can see where it dug in along this little line here. And it took a little chunk out of this side, but that's fairly cosmetic. It has nothing to do with the structure of the window. A little bit of Abitron mixed with some liquid wood. Put on there, filled, looks great. Sanded down flush, same thing here. And by tomorrow, I should have this middle set. So this is again the middle of the bay. This will all be glazed and on its way to drying down here in the basement. Also, the new interesting challenge with these windows versus anything I've dealt with here in my house is that we have these arched windows and the other ones are half round in some of the rooms there, which even though they have an Italianate house and mine's a Second Empire, and Second Empires are specifically known for having rounded windows or half rounded windows, my house never had any. My house was built so late into the whole Second Empire fad that styles had changed enough where they weren't doing the half rounded windows anymore. Every single one of my windows is square. Now there are arches in the bricks and there are pediments above those arches that fill in that blank space, just like the one we cleaned up above the door. So I guess in a weird way, working on what is an Italianate house's windows, I'm actually learning a bit more about the Second Empire style. And yes, Italianates are pretty common to have rounded and arched windows as well, so it's not uncommon for that feature to be on an Italian house, to be on an Italianate house. But it's definitely completing my repertoire for understanding, more about Second Empire architecture, which is pretty fun. So that's gonna do it for this one, guys. I really hope you guys enjoyed. I'm sorry these videos have become a bit more of a every other week arrangement. Of course, I'd prefer them to be every week, but I just, doing all of these windows. Again, this is 3 of 31 that I have to do. So it's a very tall order. But I do kind of want you guys slightly to understand my thinking about why I took on this job now. So Matt and Nikki over at Mansard Media, over at the Volcamp House, are and have been pretty good friends to me within the last year. We've, hung out quite a bit. I've been over to their place a lot. They've been over here. And we've really grown to enjoy the history of our house and conversating about it and sharing these stories and all these things. And it's become a really amazing thing having them both in my life. And so as a friend favor, of course I wanted to take on the windows. Second thing is, I get to grow my skills and save another house in my community. Which is, of course, my goal here with this entire house is to show people how, you know, you can do this if you want to. Like, this isn't entirely out of reach if you're creative and you have the drive to save one of these places. It is possible. It isn't easy and it will take you a very long time, but it's obviously possible. And people like Matt and Nikki and a lot of the other people around St. Louis that I've met have really shown me that. And the more and more I talk to people, the more and more I realize that there's a lot of people doing this, which is amazing. The thing is, of course, yes, I am being paid to do this. But for Matt and Nikki, the amazing thing that I was talking to them about is when they pay me, their house gets work done, part of their house's historic character gets saved, which then turns to me putting that money into my house, which means more pieces of a historic structure get saved. Then I go and I pay Eric Laval, who's doing all the historic woodwork for the Mansard roof, and he's doing another house as well. So a third historic house in the area gets saved. And so it's this trickle-down effect of these funds not just going into one house or two houses, but now three houses, and who knows who Eric's paying for, you know, little bits and bobs. And one of the major things Matt and Nikki were having such trouble with on their adventure, and it's the challenge I feel very deep in my heart as well, is finding a contractor, finding any kind of construction personnel in any of the fields who will come into your house and care. I mean, even just a little bit of caring goes a long way these days, because most people come into your house, they will rip, remove, destroy, and they don't care. They want to get in there, they want to do the quickest, easiest jobs and pay me now sort of thing. But with Matt and Nikki, what they're going to get out of me with these windows is someone who genuinely cares that they look great for them, that they last as long as they last. You know, that they stay with this house, that these original details are preserved and put back. I care deeply about that. And so, you know, I ended up just being one of the rare, odd humans that actually will care about their house. And so that's why this arrangement ended up working out. I know for a lot of you, it might not be the best situation. Hey, Caleb, it's going to take longer on your house. Yes, but I can put more funds to getting other things in this house done. There are a lot of things I do have to pay for, and this amount of money I will make off these windows will go a long way to fixing a lot of the needs that are needed here. Just like you guys have done a lot and gone a long way to making sure this stuff survives. So that's the end of the video. I thank you guys so much for sticking with me. Again, sorry the videos won't be as frequent, but I do plan on getting some amazing random little videos and bits done for you guys. That way it can hold you off between the real true episodes each week. So be somewhat patient with me this summer as I go through the motions of all these different things I have to do. I'm gonna buckle down. I'm gonna work as harder than I ever have in my entire life, and we're gonna definitely get all of this stuff done. So I hope you'll continue to join me on that one. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week, and I hope to see you guys again very, very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.